Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome back to a little bit of online learning this morning. We are in our final unit of the course. Wanted to just very, very quickly go over some calendar issues with you guys, so that way you would be able to um, kind of have a better idea of where we're going next. I'm going to pull the calendar really quickly here, just so that you guys can see along with me what I'm talking about. So this final unit is going to be dealing mainly with like the agricultural aspects of environmental geography, with a couple of other environmental issues popped in there as well. These are kind of the big picture highlights from this unit. We've decided to cut as much fat as possible with this unit and just kind of hit some of the major basics. So really, it's only going to go on for 2 weeks. This is a short one. Yeah, this is a 2 week one. Gonna do it in exam. Just gonna do it all in multiple choice format for you guys for Tuesday the 28th of April, and that's gonna pretty much wrap up the units for this course over the next couple of weeks. And then what we're going to do is something a little bit different. Yeah. No doubt while we're under quarantine, you've been exposed to a lot of popular culture in the form of streaming media. And so what we've decided is that in the final few weeks of this course, we want you to look back at maybe some of these more familiar pop culture films. This is not an endorsement for Disney Plus or anything like that, so please don't take it that way. But many of you guys have access to the platform or similar platforms, and surprisingly to some, there are several films that deal directly with some serious human geography issues. Whether you're talking about the film WALL-E, which you'll be looking at in a couple of weeks, if you so decide, there's an assignment that goes along with that that you can that you can do that you will be assigned to do if you so choose to. That really kind of helps you to analyze some of the geographic aspects, specifically environmental geographic aspects of the film WALL-E. So that one is going to focus mainly on the environmental geography piece. Black Panther is full of geography, and so that will be the next film that we will take a look at. And then finally, the film Zootopia is also filled with human geography. If you do have access to Disney Plus at home, all three of these films are available on that platform. And again, these are optional assignments that you can do to sort of one, and most importantly, enhance your knowledge of geography and really see kind of the connections between maybe films that you know and geography that you've learned this year. And it's like, wow, okay, there really is geography everywhere. Secondly, it could be a little bit of a grade help before final exams. Yeah. So that is that's the schedule for right now. You'll notice there's no Friday classes any longer because we are now using Friday as a catch-up day and new instruction happening on Thursday or on Monday through Thursday. And speaking of new instruction, a little bit of new instruction for today. Yeah. So the lesson that you were given yesterday to do mainly dealt with just kind of looking at agricultural regions around the world, seeing how agriculture overlaps with climate zones that you already know. And so today the idea is to give you a little bit more of a formal introduction regarding the kind of gradual evolution and change around agriculture around the world. If we're using the term agriculture, just to make sure that we're all on the same page here definitionally, we are talking about the deliberate tending of crops and livestock to produce food, fiber, and fuel. Now, we knew the food and fiber part probably, but what we oftentimes, or we knew the food part probably, what we oftentimes forget is that agriculture is not just for human consumption, okay? But also for fibers, like for example, if one raises sheep, that's a form of agriculture for the production of wool, right? We also grow feed for livestock. So a lot of the food that we grow is actually not directly for humans, but more indirectly as we feed livestock that's going to eventually feed humans. And also for biofuel production. A lot of folks don't know this, but about 25% of all grain in the United States is used to produce fuel for cars, not for human or animal consumption. If you ever go to the gas station and you see that your gasoline contains ethanol, which usually does, ethanol is essentially a corn product, right? So that's produced through the agricultural industry, right? It kind of stretches out gasoline a little bit. Now, in order to set the stage for understanding the contemporary agriculture picture, we need to first of all understand how people lived before the origins of agriculture and the circumstances that gave rise to the domestication of plants and animals. Because traditionally, agriculture is not something that humans do. Agriculture is something that we have really only started about 10,000 years ago, which in the grand scheme of the existence of the planet is still rather recent. Before agriculture, hunting and gathering were the most common means of subsistence throughout the world. And it's really been the most common throughout most of human existence, is the practice of essentially hunting and gathering. And I thought I had some hunter-gatherers here, and I do not. So that is unfortunate. The size of hunting and gathering clans varied according to climate and resource availability, but inherently are pretty small. So hunting and gathering communities have always been small. We know quite a bit about them still because there's a few that still exist on the planet Earth, not many, in Australia and the Kalahari Desert of Southern Africa as well. We see hunter-gatherer communities. So, they still do exist. We're able to kind of study modern ones. We're also able to study some artifacts as well in order to understand them better. But what changed was something that we call the first, because we're going to be looking at three of them this week, but something that we call the first agricultural revolution, or sometimes what we refer to as the Neolithic revolution. According to the geographer Carl Sauer, out of areas of plenty came agriculture as the experiments necessary to establish agriculture and settle in one place would occur in lands of plenty, where there was maybe more of an abundance of wealth. Carl Sauer also, I'm going to press forward here. Sorry, folks, I thought I had this up front, but I did not. There's some hunter-gatherers. Carl Sauer also basically devised this map that you see here, which is essentially a map of your agricultural hearths around the world, and what kind of innovations took place within those particular hearths. Again, you're looking at about 10,000 years ago in some areas. You will notice that the domestication of plants has occurred in various places around the world at various times. The majority of scholars believe that the first agricultural revolution took place there, if you look at the map, in Southwest Asia, right around Mesopotamia, the Fertile Crescent between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, marking the true beginning of the first agricultural revolution. And it seems that in this particular location, it was grain crops like wheat and like barley that grew well in this climate. And people soon found that the river inundated plains of the Mesopotamia provided well irrigated fields for farming, and with this reliable food source, people could produce essentially a surplus of grain, which they could store for long-term distribution, and then use to settle permanently in one place. So the idea here is that with a surplus of agriculture, with a surplus of food product where you don't have to hunt and gather your food on a daily or weekly basis, you could actually store food and therefore have a permanent settlement. So this is also the beginning of urbanization too, believe it or not, because it allowed for the permanence of settlement. So so that's important to keep in mind. Um, as you can also tell, um, well, actually, no, you can't tell this from the map. But of course, with permanent settlement is going to come population increase. With permanent settlement and population increase comes this idea that not everybody any longer has to be a farmer. So you will begin to see specialization of labor as well, where you will see these different jobs that will begin to emerge that will support agriculture, but not necessarily directly be farming jobs. And then, of course, because humans just do this with the specialization of labor, will come the formation of social classes as we deem some professions to be more important and essential than others. Now, this revolution, of course, was global over time, as you can tell from the map. Southeast Asia, yeah, Mesopotamia had a separate, or sorry, Southeast Asia had a separate agricultural revolution. Mesoamerica, now we call it Latin America, had a separate agricultural revolution as well, where the focus was not so much wheat and barley, but maize and beans and squash. We sometimes refer to those three products as las tres hermanas, the three sisters. If you build an entire diet around corn, squash, and beans, you can have actually a well-balanced diet around those three. It's pretty cool. You will always be nourished. Central China, West Africa also seem to be early starters. So the point is that you're not really looking at one agricultural revolution, but several independent revolutions that took place around the planet between 10 and 3,000 years ago or so. And it's not a sudden revolution, right? This is really more of a gradual transition over time to agriculture. So that's important to keep in mind as well. Of course, as you can also tell from the map here, it's not only about growing products out of the ground, but the domestication of animals, right? The use of animals as beasts of burden, as a source of meat, as providers of milk is also part of the agricultural revolution. Goats, pigs, sheep become part of this rapidly growing array of animals in captivity. And it may have originated as animals attach themselves to human settlements as scavengers or for protection from predators. We don't really know, but there's some theories there. Regardless of anything, and we're going to kind of close with this. Regardless of anything, all agriculture that's taken place as a result of the first agricultural revolution is what we call subsistence agriculture. Subsistence agriculture is simply growing enough food to survive, growing enough food for local consumption, and not for commercial purposes or profit. Yeah. And this is going to be the norm throughout human history since the first agricultural revolution. Subsistence farmers are going to generally hold land in common. Surpluses of food is going to be shared with the community, and the accumulation of personal wealth is oftentimes somewhat restricted, as individual advancement at the cost of the group is pretty limited. Now, of course, subsistence agriculture has largely been on the decline since the second agricultural revolution, which is very much connected to industrialization, and we will begin to discuss that tomorrow. So stay tuned. Have a good day for today.